皆さんこんにちは。Welcome back to Harupaka Japanese. Today we are going to learn about the particle ka, a small but very important word in Japanese. It's mainly used to ask questions, but there's more to it than that. So first, what is ka? The most common use of ka is as a question marker. In Japanese, we simply add ka to the end of a formal or polite sentence to turn it into a question. Unlike English, we don't need to change the word order at all. Let's look at a simple example. これはリンゴです。This is an apple. Now, just add ka at the end. これはリンゴですか? Is this an apple? That's it. The sentence stays exactly the same. Adding ka is all you need. Let's look at a few more examples. あなたは学生です。You are a student. あなたは学生ですか? Are you a student? あなたはコーヒーが好きです。You like coffee. あなたはコーヒーが好きですか? Do you like coffee? I put parentheses around あなた in the questions for a reason. In normal conversation, a plain sentence without a subject usually sounds like it's about I. So in a statement, the subject あなた is usually necessary. But in a question, if the subject is missing, it naturally sounds like you're asking about the other person, you. That's why in questions, we usually don't include あなた. Since the main goal here is to explain the particle ka, I won't go too deep into the subject issue. I just wanted to briefly explain why I sometimes put parentheses around it. Let's go back to the topic. As you can see, the structure doesn't change. Adding ka simply turns a statement into a question. This is very common in formal or polite Japanese, such as in conversations with strangers, teachers, someone older than you, or at work. Now, here is something important to know. In casual conversation, we usually don't use ka. Using ka in casual speech can sound unnatural. Instead, we just raise the intonation at the end of the sentence. For example, 今日行く? Are you going today? Compare that to the polite version. 今日行きますか? You might hear ka without です in anime or dramas like 学生か? This is not normal casual speech. It's usually used by rough or strong characters like samurai, old man, or delinquent. Sometimes silly or goofy characters also talk this way, which makes it sound funny. Interestingly, even if they use the same ka line, the voice acting can make the meaning completely different depending on the character. For example, samurai or cool wild old men usually have deep voices, while silly or goofy characters often have high-pitched voices. That's one of the things that makes it so distinctive. In real-life casual Japanese, we usually say 学生 with a rising tone instead of 学生か? So remember, ka is for a polite question, but casual conversation usually drop it. So far, we've seen how to use ka to make a question. Before we move on to the next use, I want to ask you something. In general, why do we ask questions? Take a moment to think, and can you tell me why? Exactly! We ask questions because we don't know the answer. If we already knew the answer, it wouldn't be a question. It would be a quiz. The particle ka is used to make a question because its core meaning is unknown. Keep that in mind as we look at the next use. Ka isn't just for questions. It can also be used like or when giving someone a choice between options. For example, コーヒーかお茶を飲みますか? Will you have coffee or tea? Even though the literal translation is will you drink coffee or tea? In practice, we often say it like would you like some coffee or tea? When offering a drink to a guest. We give the choices because we don't know which one the guest prefers. This use of か is also common in which one questions. 猫か犬、どっちが好きですか? Cat or dog, which one do you like? In Japanese, we tend to mention the choices first, then ask which one is preferred. Saying どっちが好きですか? 犬か猫 sounds a bit poetic. It might work on the poster, but it's not how people usually speak in daily conversation. This use of か isn't limited to question sentences. It can also show options or uncertainty in statements. For example, 5月か6月に日本に行きたいです。I want to go to Japan in May or June. In this case, the trip date hasn't been decided yet. So, we are giving possible choices just like or in English. When your subordinate clause contains a question word, you have to put か at the end of the subordinate clause because question words and か are best friends. What is a subordinate clause? Before we talk about the particle か, let me explain a subordinate clause in simple terms. A subordinate clause is a small sentence inside a bigger sentence. It usually cannot stand alone. It depends on the main sentence to make sense. Let's take a look at this sentence. I don't know what time it starts. I don't know is the main clause because it can stand alone and make sense by itself. What time it starts is a subordinate clause or embedded question because it cannot stand alone. It depends on the main clause to make sense. In English, we usually put the main idea at the beginning of the sentence and the details at the end. In the example we saw, the main idea is I don't know. I don't know what? I don't know what time it starts. So the detail is what time it starts. In Japanese, it's the opposite. The detail, in this case the subordinate clause, comes first, and the main idea comes at the end. Let's see the Japanese sentence. 何時に始まるかわかりません. The first part, 何時に始まるか is the equivalent of what time it starts, the detail or embedded question. And the following part, わかりません is the equivalent of I don't know, the main idea. So, when making embedded questions in Japanese, always put the small question first, then the main clause at the end. If you want to dive deeper into Japanese sentence structure, please take a look at my previous video. Now that we understand what a subordinate clause is, let's see how the particle か works in embedded questions with a question word. Whenever your subordinate clause has a question word, you must put か at the end of that clause. Think of it this way. Question words and か are best friends. They always go together. The か goes at the end of the small question, not at the end of the main sentence. After か, you add the main clause, like I know or please tell me. Now let's try making more sentences together to understand this more deeply. First, let's look at this sentence again. I don't know what time it starts. I'm going to use the same sentence as before because we haven't really broken it down yet. So, how do we say I don't know in Japanese? Yes, わかりません. If you said 知りません, that's yes and no. Both can mean I don't know, but they are used in different situations. I explained the difference in detail in another video, so if you want to understand when to use わかりません and 知りません, please watch that video. So, let's use わかりません for the sentence I don't know in this case. And I don't know is the main clause, so in Japanese, it goes at the end of the sentence. Next, we need to make the part what time it starts. How do we say what time in Japanese? Yes, that's 何時. Now, this phrase needs a verb. In our example, we are saying what time it starts, so we use the verb to start. Because there is a verb to start, We are talking about a specific time, and that's why we use the particle に after the word 何時. So we get 何時に. And this is actually a point that English native speaker often miss because in English, we don't say I don't know at what time it starts. Now, what about the verb start? Did you say 始める? Good try, but not in this case. 始める means to start something, like I start a class or I start a project. But our sentence is it starts, not I started. When something starts, we use 始まる, not 始める. Japanese has transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, and this is a classic example. This point is especially tricky for English native speakers. Of course, English also has transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, but the difference isn't as clear or as systematic as it is in Japanese or French. I should definitely make a separate video about this. In my opinion, this is one of the reasons English became a global language. English doesn't rely as much on verb types to show who does what, so it's easier to use in many situations. This is also one of the reasons Japanese sentences often don't require an explicit subject. In Japanese, the subject is often clear just from the verb you choose. So, if you are studying Japanese, you are actually lucky. By learning Japanese as a second language, you are being exposed to the idea of how other languages express meaning. That kind of perspective really can change the way you think about language, and even about life. We derailed a bit, but I'm just really passionate about language learning. And this is how I see languages. I think I'm a unique teacher, aren't I? Okay, let's continue. So, the sentence goes like, 何時に始まる. In English, this looks correct because it already covers what time it starts. But in Japanese, we are not done yet. Don't forget today's topic, the particle か. When your subordinate clause contains a question word, you must add か at the end of that clause. So the correct phrase becomes 何時に始まるか. Therefore, the sentence I don't know what time it starts in Japanese will be 何時に始まるかわかりません. Ta-da! Next, can you ask me, do you know what time it starts in Japanese? You asked me, 何時に始まるかわかりますか? Right! Or, 何時に始まるか知っていますか? Yes, this also works. Because it's a question, 知っていますか works too. And my answer is 何時に始まるかわかりません. The next practice. Can you make this sentence in Japanese? Please tell me who will come. You can pause the video. Or should I put an advertisement here? But honestly, I don't know how to do that. But it's a win-win, right? You get thinking time and I earn a few cents. I'll think about it. 答え合わせ Let's check the answer. First, let's make the main clause. In this sentence, please tell me is the main clause because it can stand alone as a sentence. How do we say please do something in Japanese? Did you say お願いします? Good try, but the answer is no. お願いします is used by itself, not together with a verb. My question was, how do we say, please do something? The answer is verb in the te form plus ください. Our sentence is, please tell me, so we need the verb to tell. You might think of the verb 言う, which means to say, and that's not wrong, but in this case, the image is that you give me information or teach me something you know. So in Japanese, we usually use the verb 教える, which means to teach. Now we conjugate 教える into the te form. The te form of 教える is 教えて. So we get 教えてください. That's it for the part Please tell me. Now let's make the subordinate clause. In this case, it's who will come. How do we say who in Japanese? Yes, that's 誰. Who is the subject of the subordinate clause, so we need to mark it with the subject particle が. So we say 誰が. If you are wondering why we use が, not は, please check out my previous video. Next, how do we say to come in Japanese? Right, that's 来る. Will come is the future tense. But in Japanese, the present tense and the future tense use the same form. And because this is a subordinate clause, we don't use the formal form. The formal form is mainly used at the end of a sentence, not in the middle. So we simply use 来る as it is. Now we have 誰が来る. In English, this already looks correct. But in Japanese, don't forget today's topic, the particle か. To mark the end of a subordinate clause that contains a question word, we add か. So it becomes 誰が来るか. And finally, we add the main clause. 誰が来るか教えてください. Ta-da! So far, we've looked at embedded questions that use question words. In these sentences, the question word stays inside the subordinate clause, and we use the particle か to mark the end of that embedded question. Now, let me ask you something. What if there is no question word? At the beginning of this video, I said that the core meaning of the particle か is unknown. So here is the key question. What if the unknown part of the sentence is not who or what, but simply whether something is true or not? For example, will he come or not? Does it start or not? In English, this kind of unknown is expressed with if or whether. And in Japanese, yes, it's the particle か. Because even without a question word, the idea is the same. Something is unknown and か is there to mark it. So next, let's look at how か works in embedded yes or no questions, the Japanese version of if and whether. First, this sentence. I don't know if he will come. Let's break it down. The first part, I don't know, is the main clause as it stands alone. How do we say I don't know in Japanese? Yes, that's わかりません. You got it. We did it earlier. And in Japanese, the main clause goes at the end of the sentence. So the sentence ends with わかりません. Next, we will make the embedded question, if he will come. How do we say he in Japanese? Right, that's 彼. He is the subject of the subordinate clause, so we need to add the subject particle が. So we get 彼が. Next, how do we say to come in Japanese? Yes, that's right. That's 来る. So now we have 彼が来る. There is no question word like who or what, but this sentence still has something unknown. The unknown part is simply this. Will he come? Yes or no. In English, this kind of yes or no question is changed into if or whether. In Japanese, this yes or no unknown is marked with the particle か. So, for an embedded if-whether question, you only need か to show that something is unknown. Just like before, か comes at the end of the embedded question and closes it. So, the full sentence becomes 彼が来るかわかりません. Let's look at another example. Do you know if it will rain? Again, there is no question word here. This type of if is explained with か in Japanese, as we saw earlier. So, how do we say, do you know in Japanese? Right, 知っていますか? Or, わかりますか also works, because it's a question sentence. This time, let's use 知っていますか? This is the main clause because it can stand alone. So, in Japanese, it goes at the end of the sentence. Now, let's make the subordinate clause, the embedded question. if it will rain. When I learned English, I learned that this it isn't a real subject. It's just a dummy subject. This concept doesn't exist in Japanese, so we cannot translate the sentence literally. Instead, we focus on the verb to rain. In English, rain is a verb, but in Japanese, we need to use a phrase, 雨が降る. 雨 is a noun, rain, the water that falls from the sky. 降る is a verb, but by itself, it just means something falls from above. So, we need to specify what is falling. That's why 雨 is the subject. And because 雨 is the subject, we mark it with the particle が. Now, we are only missing if/whether. In Japanese, that's か. So, we add か to the end of the embedded question and we get 雨が降るか. So, the full sentence becomes 雨が降るか知っていますか? Ta-da! Up to this point, we've learned that for embedded if-whether questions, we can simply use the particle か. For example, 彼が来るかわかりません. I don't know if he will come. 雨が降るか知っていますか? Do you know if it will rain? Now you might also see these sentences. 彼が来るかどうかわかりません。雨が降るかどうか知っていますか? So, what is どうか? It's similar to or not in English. It's only used with if-whether sentences, not with question words like who or what. So why do we sometimes add どうか? どうか simply makes the yes or no choices more explicit. It's like saying, will he come? Yes or no? Which is it? When we add どうか, we are clearly showing that the unknown point is only yes or no, and nothing else. That's why どうか is often used when you want to emphasize the yes or no choice. The sentence might otherwise sound unclear, or in more careful or written Japanese. So, can we omit どうか? Yes, very often. In daily conversation, か alone is enough. So, that's the basic idea of the particle か. At its core, か marks something that is unknown, whether it's a direct question or an embedded question. Once you understand this core meaning, many different uses of the particle か start to make sense. 最後まで見てくれてありがとうございました。この動画がもし役に立ったら、LIKE ボタンと新しいハイプ機能も押してね。そして、Don't forget to subscribe! 励みになります。じゃあまた次の動画でお会いしましょう。じゃあそれまで日本語の勉強頑張ってね。バイバイ。If we already knew the answer, it wouldn't be a quiz. It would be... 間違えた。If we already knew the answer, it wouldn't be the... なんだっけ? Okay. If we already knew the answer... And this is also one of the reasons Japanese sentences often don't require an explicit sentences. But the difference isn't as clear or as systematic as it is in... Don't forget that...